everyone. This is a Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Young, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And today I am very thrilled to be having Peter Melby on the phone today. I had him on here because I was at a conference, maybe about a month ago or less, and he was speaking there. And I loved a lot of the concepts that he presented around culture, kind of moving culture forward, enhancements to process around people. And just his whole leadership style and philosophy, I really appreciated it. And I first actually found out about him through one of his work colleagues, someone who works for him, Sarah Bernhardt. And she is just, was an amazing person. She and I worked together on a volunteer basis on a committee, and we became friends. And then I found out about Peter. So welcome, Peter.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey?
So I have a company called Greystone Technology. We do IT services, and we talk about the fact that we do people-focused IT services. So started this company with my partner in 2001. So we've been doing it for 18 years, grew from really one person doing the work to now I think with the hires that we're bringing on will be over 90. And so it's one of those situations where we're continually learning, what this next phase is going to bring us from a business perspective, cultural perspective, and especially right now in the IT industry. The hiring market is so tight as it is in most places, but I think there's negative unemployment as far as the groups of people that we're really looking to bring on. And so our big competitive advantage has to be how we engage and find and keep our people. And so that's a big evolution for us, starting in an industry that's mostly technical. So that's where I spend most of my day right now is looking at how our people practices really put us in prime position in the market.
Oh, I love that. That's what I like about it is it's definitely a more strategic way of looking at it. And one of the reasons why I appreciate that is because so on the show, it's leadership with heart. So people were like, well, is this all squishy stuff, rainbows and perfection? And it's not. And I like your more objective way of looking at it. Doesn't mean there's not heart infusing its way in there, but that there's an objective way of looking at it. And it says that this just makes business sense. This is our differentiation. And so I'm going to hold on to it, as the founder of the company. So I just love that perspective of your why and to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people when they look at culture do see the fluffy parts of it. But in CEO circles and in business executive circles, most of the conversation revolves obviously around performance and things like that. And realizing that with our team and so much of what I've seen in the market, there is a very direct connection for how those things work. And so then when you start to talk about culture in a broader sense, you start to get a bigger audience, not just the people who are interested in making sure that the workplace is kind and enjoyable to employees, but that we're actually doing something worth doing.
Which, by the way, is one of the things that makes the environment worth being in, which makes it feel kind of nice because if you're in a place where you're doing meaningful work, it's one of the biggest drivers for engagement and retention anyway. So
absolutely,
you take care of it all of it at one time by focusing on that one thing. So
certainly,
I love it. So how would let's say more people, the direct reports that, could be anybody that you manage, but I'm thinking direct reports, how would they describe your leadership style?
It probably depends, on the area of the business. If it's someone who is working, in the area of the business where I also, have strengths, and I'm heavily involved, then there's definitely a collaborative innovation that goes on. I'm very close to the work product of what we're doing. And over time, I mean, I've learned that for the areas that I'm not really, strong in, that the giving someone autonomy and letting them have the space to be strong in that, needs to be a core strength of mine. And so that's where I end up being a little bit different, on both sides of that fence. And I get a lot of feedback over times about, whether or not I'm actually strong in some of the areas that I'm participating in, rather than just overseeing. But I'm not a micromanager, and I tell people that I'm not trying to say that as a pat on the back. I'm just terrible at it. I'm not a detail person. So if I'm the one sitting there saying, do this, do this, do this, and trying to keep things on track, we're not in the right place. I need to have, strong, integration skills that complement, the vision, and the innovation, that I enjoy leading.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and I think that's the right way to do it. That's probably why you've experienced the growth you have, because you've trusted your people. And, it's saying, these are my strengths, these are yours, and I'm going to let you go do yours. And of course, that comes with, I'm going to let you take risks that might mean you make mistakes. I'm going to let you take accountability for that and explain and figure out how we kind of get out of that. And we may do this together, but like, those are all the things that go with this idea of empowerment and accountability.
Yeah, and I think our growth has really come from the fact, not that we're great at those things, but that we were and always have been insistent on learning and adapting. So, I mean, we have thousands of stories, of mistakes that we've made, but the recognition that instead of burying those, if we really bring them to the forefront, then we will do something that's not happening in the market. And that's ultimately why I want to be in the position that I am, is that I want to create something that isn't there. And in the IT services space, a truly human connected organization, is not something, that we've seen very often, if at all.
I would imagine so. We really don't think of people-centered focus when we think of IT. I mean, it's more processes and systems and rollouts and different ways to just do something different from the product perspective, but not as much heavy on the people.
Yeah, there's definitely a stereotype that's it's well earned in a lot of ways, but that's why we exist, and it's why we have the opportunities that we do. So, yeah.
Oh, I love it. So, where does your drive to lead come from? Most of us have that. It's just something in our background that it was either a challenge, it was a parent, it was another leader, or something. I'd be curious to know where your drive to lead starts.
Yeah. So, my dad's a scientist. My mom's an artist, and that, and they're both teachers. And so, bringing all of that together, if I look at my upbringing, I was always encouraged to create, but I was always encouraged to create with a purpose. And so, as my entrepreneurial streak, which I had, from a very young age, as it came to the forefront, combined with some of my, I'll say, I guess I could say youthful impatience, but I don't know how much it's changed as I've gotten older. It is the fact that I want to create something. I want to build something. I loved Legos growing up. I loved, the idea of construction. I thought about being an architect, a builder, but ultimately as I looked at where my strengths were, building with people, and building organizationally and doing something, in a market that was very rare or very foreign, became very exciting from the standpoint that I'm not necessarily building something, that I can physically see, but building something that no one else has ever done, in a space that we feel really, really needs it. So that's the drive, that we have now, and obviously there's the financial part of it, and there's, all of these different aspects, but seeing how it connects to, just the art of creating, and the science of being able to be methodically successful at something, and bringing those things together is a bit of a unique trait. I think that most people who grow up without that dichotomy, probably skip over.
I love that about all of us when we talk about diversity. It really is about our upbringing, our past, our lens that we just live by, and I think that's the most important thing. It comes in different shades and all those other things, but a lot of times it's just about where we started in our lens, and that really is the beauty of like the workplace too, right? Is because every single story is unique, every single experience is unique. Then when we come forward to that table, we, like you said, doing things differently, innovating, presenting things to the market that haven't been presented before. We're able to do that because every single person started at a different place.
Yeah, and especially in an industry where there's such a lack of common sense. That's just one of the things over, the 20 years that I've been in the industry, and really the IT industry as we know it now is only about 25 years old. But it has this reputation for not having common sense. We don't know how to talk to people. We don't know how to ask questions. We don't know how to engage them. We don't really know how to solve problems. And so we developed a saying that, a good IT person solves problems, but a great IT person knows what problem they're solving. And realizing the only way that you can make that jump is to know how to connect enough, with people to gain a lot more information than typically you get just from the computers, and things like that. So the industry being as young as it is, it makes sense to me. It's pretty natural to me why it's ended up where it has. It just really needs to be different.
Number one, I love that personal mission that I can tell that you have a passion around, trying to just solve for that one thing of the industry itself and the lens of the industry. So just recently, I have 4 kids, and my oldest, who's a girl, she has this thing where it's like she gets very linear in her thinking, and it's hard for her to really go outside the lines to start to problem solve. And I tend to be more of that visionary kind of go with the gut, go real quickly, connect the dots super fast. So I'm always feeling like I'm having to coach her to be, okay, this thing happened. And then, okay, well, I'm already like 5 steps ahead thinking about, okay, well, let's do this and let's do that. And what about this? And did you do that? And she's just like, what? Because she's thinking very linearly. And so I like, your idea of like, let's bring everybody in. Let's think of this differently. Let's not be the same. Industry we always were. Let's mix it up. Let's think about how we can use people to drive us forward. And I just think that's a great way to lead. And I'm sure people are drawn to that too.
Yeah, I think that for me, there was an evolution in realizing that there's a lot of value in the strengths that come with the more linear thinking. It just has to be supported, by the innovation, pushing outside those boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think that just reinforces that idea of diverse thought and diverse backgrounds. I think I have the background I do because of my background. I'm able to see that in the lens I do and just quickly connect the dots because of my background. And hers, which probably, to be honest, probably have kept her more in a bubble, more in a here's the next step view. And so maybe her brain just adapted to that. So now trying to retrain her to be thinking, okay, no, we're not going to go down that road. I know that's the road you want to go down. We're not going down that road. We're going down this road. Right. And so it's just interesting to see that. And now it's at the point, and this is, I make these type of analogies all the time when I look my children and the people I lead, because often it is going, okay, how do I help you self-correct or course correct in this direction without me giving you the solution, but just trying to guide you to the place where you come up with your own solution, you feel successful in the process. Right?
Yeah. And one of the things that we, focus on a lot, and that I really work to share is the idea and my belief that human nature is something that on the surface, it's easy to see humans, as very conflicted, very challenging. But the more that we dig down, we have a common thread that runs between all of us. And I think that I have the same thing with my kids, and with my team, they're all humans. So seeing, the same humanity in each of them means that the lessons that I learn at work, oftentimes apply to home, and the lessons that I learn at home, have helped me as a leader, at work. And it all works, to just be overall very humbling between employees.
Isn't that right? It's so true. I've had to apologize more than once, and I've been doing some research lately on this next book, and been thinking about, there's this concept of, obviously we talk about leadership with heart, and all the different people I talk to, and just getting to the bottom of what that means. But then reaching out to people that maybe, like I previously managed, and they maybe have had certain feedback, and the feedback was positive. But then I'm like, but how could it be positive? Because I kind of screwed up. Not a lot, but I screwed up, and I had to admit I was sorry, or a couple times to you. I'm thinking that in my mind, and then the things that they would point out that resonated with them about my leadership was just like, really, like things that impressed them. I'm like, that was the thing that makes you listen or something. You know what I mean?
It's
so
always
kind of
surprising.
We're trying to get to the bottom of this. Like, what is it that makes everybody tick here? So this is just a wonderful journey, and I'm happy that you're on it with me too, because this is all part of it. So
I think if we're honest, we're all on it. I think it's just whether or not we recognize, where we're at and how intentional we are about it, which is why I love these conversations, because I think it brings things out of me, every time I get a chance to talk about it this intently.
How intentional. I love that. Okay. So knowing where you are and where you come from, and kind of where you're going with the growth and the just the focus and for the industry, can you recall a time for, when, as a leader, when maybe you weren't so proud of your leadership, just how you led a project, a person, a process, and you weren't happy with it? And what did you do to come out of that? What was your resolution for being the person now that you are today? And of course, I realize that's not a perfect person, but it's still, that greater person.
Yeah. Boy, a time when my leadership wasn't up to par. Where do I start? I actually, one of the most key lessons that I've learned started in my personal life, and it was shortly after I got married. And my wife and I were having a conversation because she had done the laundry, and something, I forget if it was a pair of headphones or a Fitbit or something like that of mine, had gone through the wash and was no longer operational. And we were having a discussion, and it turned into a debate about laundry protocol. And when you check the pockets, do you check the pockets when you put your clothes in the hamper, or do you check your pockets when you put the clothes in the washing machine? And it escalated, as those conversations tend to escalate, and we both dug in our heels. And the more, insistent she was that her process was right, the more combative I became. I don't. No one's ever had conversations like this, especially in their marriage. But as we were just both pushing this issue, finally something in her snapped, and she said, "What are you trying to do?" So, what do you mean? She said, "Why are you trying to make me feel worse?" And she said, there's nothing that you're going to say that is going to help me do this differently next time. She said, I already know what I need to do, and I feel terrible about it. And that was a really, pivotal moment in our, the early years of our marriage, for one, because I started to realize I recoiled, and I thought, I'm not trying to make you feel worse. And then I had the realization, no, I'm trying to actually make myself feel better. I'm trying to, in this debate about laundry protocol, which it wasn't, that wasn't the real conversation at all. The real conversation was trying to assign blame. And so, it made sense to me that she looked at it and said, like, the things that I was saying weren't actually going to help her in the future, that she had learned her lesson, that she had, or learned what she would do differently next time. And so I had this very, mind-shifting realization that I was trying to assign blame to make myself feel better about something. And I was doing it in a way that was, that I didn't see anything about what she was doing as that she understood. And so I was just trying to push for understanding, push, to see her, share in some of that remorse. And once I saw that it was there, I realized, oh wait, that's that wasn't really what I was going for. And so, and then to realize that I was doing all of that in a very wasteful way. That it was very self-focused. And so it took me a while to realize, for that to apply to my professional life. But when we got, I had a manager, and I always had good intentions, around wanting to lead a team, build a culture, be a good leader. And I think everybody does have good intentions, around that, at least on some level. But I had this one manager where we were constantly at odds, and there was a lot of tension, a lot of arguments, especially over the years as we got more and more comfortable with each other. And there was a moment, a time when he missed a critical meeting, and he walked in, and he walked into my office, and I could just see, instead of the usual combativeness, just the fear, of the repercussion, of what was coming. And he said, "I know, let me have it." And I stopped for a minute, because it was a pivotal moment. And I remembered back to, those lessons that I had learned, in my relationship, and I stopped myself, because I was livid. He knew he should have been there. It was, inexcusable that he wasn't, and it was detrimental to what we were trying to do. And so I stopped, and I said, "I don't think I have anything to say that you haven't already said to yourself. And I don't think that I have anything to say." I said, "If I were to just yell at you right now, it's probably just to make myself feel better about that, because I'm upset." I said, "But if I can acknowledge that I'm upset, and you can acknowledge that that you're very critical of yourself in this, then I feel like we might have a better path forward." And
Wow.
It was life-changing, not just for that relationship, but just to see how much that the defensiveness that came from that fear, opened up into a relief, not a relief that I didn't care, but a relief that we could actually own, our humanity together a little bit. And so that shifted my view in leadership so much, to realize that if I'm going into these conversations as quote unquote the boss, and saying and telling everybody how I feel about everything, rather than trying to understand, first how they're, seeing themselves, how they're criticizing themselves, then I'm missing a huge leadership opportunity. And so that was about 8 years ago that incident took place. And I'm still I still have impatience. I still, have, high standards. I still definitely slip into that self-focused view, of trying to assign blame to make myself feel better, because I'm a human, and that's very natural. But just the things that I've, been able to work on in myself to recognize that, at times, and course correct, before it causes the damage that it does for so many of us over time, is probably the most important lesson that I've learned.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I love the way you used humanity a couple times in that, because I think we have this view, that, leaders are supposed to be the heroes and wear the cape and be perfect. And what we discover is, I think there's actually more perfection and brilliance in the places where we mess up, but then we have this awakening, which you did after that interaction with your wife. And we were able to pull from that years later. It was pretty darn amazing. And it speaks to your emotional intelligence as well, because you were able to regulate your emotions like right on the spot. I'm going to be honest. I have a problem with it. I struggle with that one. And so I don't know. I probably wouldn't have just gone off yelling at him, but I don't know if my face would have, held a calm view, or if I would have been able to stay calm. I don't know. I tend to be a kinder, gentler soul, but when it gets to that kind of stuff, sometimes I can just, yeah. So I kudos to you for being able to do it. And I know, again, like you said, it's a constant struggle, but in that situation, you showed that person so much mercy. And I'd be curious to know, how did that change your relationship with that person going forward?
Oh, it changed it significantly. There was definitely, I realized that, the entire premise of our combative relationship was built on insecurity, in a number of ways. And so once we started to address that, it didn't go away, and like I said, you commend me for being able to pull that into the professional world years later. I don't know how much it's that, or just that it took me a few years, to figure out how to regulate those emotions in that situation and finally be able to bring that lesson in. But I think that so many leaders, and I'm no different. We just want to see success in things. And so when I realized the success that brought, it changed our relationship because it opened things up between us. But it also changed my relationship with every other one of my direct reports.
Oh, good point. Because then whenever that kind of situation or scenario popped up again, you just kept going, well, that worked well before. It produced more positive results before. So I'm going to continue to do that thing when that comes up again.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I just think that's a huge leadership learning. So for those who are listening, I'm hoping you caught that because, again, let's learn from our past. We can continue to move that forward. It doesn't mean we won't struggle with it, but let's pull on those things. And I think that's the beauty. And in that time when, like you said, I love what you said. You said we could own our humanity together. And I think that's critical because what happens too is, we are the leaders, and in your case, your founder, and then you get with people, and sometimes it could easily be done where maybe ego could be in there, and it's this is my organization. You could be puffed up, you could, and I'm not saying that you never are because I don't know you well enough to know if you are or aren't, but that could happen. But when you say, listen, I screwed up, and they say, I did, or you just sit in there quiet, knowing they did without coming down on them, and all of it, we're all living with each other's humanity. It's living with the imperfection that we were made from, right? And I just love it.
Yeah, and for me, it's I tend to escalate until I realize that it's an exercise in futility. I'm not getting to where I want to go just by trying to come in strong, and then I have no choice but if I want success, to ask those questions. And in the 8 years since that incident, being able to look back, and really learn over time what how to find out where people really are, what questions to ask, and things like that. And one of the things that I talk about this a lot, especially with the emerging workforce and millennials, and I joke about the fact that I'm right on the cusp. So there's two definitions of millennial by date, and I can either be one or not depending on what I choose. So but realizing that there's this reputation that that there's a brashness, or a self-entitlement and arrogance at times. And I think we do have the most externally self-confident, seeming workforce of all time. But I think we actually have the most internally self-conscious workforce of all time. And one of the things that I've learned is that when we feel low by nature, we project in some way. And so people who project confidence when they feel insecurity, then as a leader, I look at it and say, well, you're confident, but it's not based on anything substantial. So I need to remove that confidence. So I'm pushing someone down from a spot where they're already self-loathing, and then they project more. So I push harder, and then they project even more from that, and at some point I'm just burying them in the ground, and wondering why we're not getting results. And so that's probably the most lasting lesson that I've learned, is spotting the areas where in myself and my employees that insecurity, actually breeds an appearance of confidence and arrogance. And I hate, seeing that. But if I'm truly gonna, take the best approach, it's not going to be to remove the arrogance. It's going to be to really get to the bottom and the root cause of those things.
Mm. And that's funny enough, that's where you see IT people going to, which I think it's not a bad place to be, because there's a level of, just like you said, there's a reputation, some of it's earned, but there's this level of objectivity and finding the evidence and uncovering the solution.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing. And I think it's actually good when we're dealing with people. So it's like this, there's a balance between showing the emotional side, showing the human side, the per people side, and then saying, now let's get to the root. Let's actually go and do the work we do. Let's be the people we are by getting to the root cause. I love that.
Yeah, and it's funny in IT that you mentioned how black and white people think, and getting to solutions, because IT is also, it's a knowledge economy, and so an IT person talking to an IT person, there's a very natural knowledge competition in terms of technical understanding of things, and so we actually see so much inflated ego. That's bred from, I don't know if I know as much as this person, but I'm sure as heck gonna make sure that I prove that I do. And so that layer, in IT, we joke all the time. Try to get an IT person, to admit that they don't know something. That's at the core of our business, is that if we don't know it, and because no one knows everything. So if we can ask for help, we're going to get better options. We're going to get better results. But building an IT organization where it's natural to say, to raise your hand and say, I don't know how to do this, does somebody else, requires far more than just, hey, make sure to remember, that you've got a team around you. We have to breed an extremely different culture. And that's where I feel like my career really started, is recognizing that in order to get IT results, we have to figure out how to dig to the bottom, of these things. And all those lessons are kind of just an offshoot from that.
I love that. That sounds like a really good article or video series or something, Peter, for the IT industry, to kind of that idea of IT as a knowledge economy, but just really poking holes in how effective is that really for sustainable growth, for engagement, for retention of top-notch employees. There's so many different indicators. You probably could poke a hole and get that on there. I love it. That's a great concept.
Thanks.
Okay, you guys are, I'm sure there's travel. I'm sure people on projects. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I know what happens in most organizations, small, medium, large. There's this disconnect that often happens between those who are leading the team and the team that's actually out there doing a lot of that grassroots work. What do you do to reconnect with your team? Let's say when you get off a really big project, which I know you're probably rolling on them a lot of times, but is there never a reprieve, or you try to reconnect? What do you do?
I think that, so we've seen the value in really systemizing our communication within our teams, and not around specific projects, because like you said, there's always something. And so if we waited for a lull, then it's kind of the blink of an eye, and we miss it, and we don't really get the cadence that we need. But what we've realized is that in order to build a culture where there's what we call psychological safety, the ability to share real information, to admit you don't know something, to ask for help, to celebrate together, and to show up as a real person, not someone who's defensive or just trying to show the best side of what's happening. That doesn't happen overnight, and it only happens when there's consistent practice. And so as a technology company, we've worked, to put a pretty black and white system in place for the nuances and all the gray areas of people. And so we have 2 monthly meetings, or every individual in the organization has 2 monthly meetings. And one of them is a meeting, where the entire team meets together. So a manager and their direct reports. So typically, between 3 and 7 people. And in that meeting, each person is only allowed to bring a piece of paper, and it's a very specific piece of paper where they have their areas of focus for their role defined, and they just note whether or not they feel like they're running, walking, stuck, or lost in each of those things that they're working on, and then they answer the questions on their sheet of paper. What am I proud of? What could I have done better? What am I stressed out and or excited about? Because sometimes those are the same thing. And what do I need in my role? And we go around the circle and share that, very small, summary of information. Is typically 3 to 4 minutes a person, but it allows us to practice, engaging in the reality of where we're at, and also hearing where our teammates are at. So every person in the company does that with their peers and their leader once a month. And then we've restructured our performance management, into another monthly one-on-one with between each leader, and team member, where we supply the questions as the company to say, you need to answer these questions as part of your one-on-one, and really deep questions. So the manager answers the question for the employee every month, as if the employee said, am I succeeding in my job? And the manager says yes or no every month. And so we've really worked to bring some of the structure of the conversations that don't happen naturally, that we often avoid because we don't want to create discomfort. And by doing that in a monthly cadence, we practice it to the point that it becomes that humanity becomes very normal, and psychological safety becomes something that's significantly more possible to achieve than if we just left everybody to their own devices.
I love that. I actually think that is what's missing. I always tell people with whether it's customer experience or employee experience, the idea is that you leave them feeling a certain thing on the front end, but on the back end, you're supposed to proceduralize it. So I think it's brilliant, which is one thing that really hit me when I was listening to you at Molly Sherm. I think it's brilliant to put to again, go back to the objective side of things. How do we produce the emotions we want up front, the feelings that we want up front? Okay, let's ensure a process happens every time with every person. I think it's brilliant. I really do. I wish more organizations would do that. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here. I'm hoping people that listen can start to emulate some of this. And of course, if they need to, they can always reach out for clarification. And I know you offer some of these things on a website or something, but I think this is just exactly the direction we need to go. We need to be thinking about, if we want to produce the emotions up front, for whether it's our customers or employees, the same process should apply for both, to be honest, right? Where we make it where it's something happens at the same time every month, the same way with the same, right? Both teams, they know what they can plan on. And over time, first it might be kind of awkward, like, what the heck am I supposed to do with this? Or, oh, I'm kind of feeling like I'm asking the same question, so am I just going to give the same response? But over time, if these are true conversations, deep conversations, between humans, then maybe, some more stuff can come up from that. And you can go deeper, like that idea of root cause. You can find more out about the person, asking those right questions every time. So
and
hoping more people emulate it.
And it's an ongoing kind of 8-year trial and error thing for us, but it's really been transformative in the organization. And we say, having a process doesn't do our leadership for us. There's no such thing as a connect the dots, view of successful leadership, despite what a lot of business books, would try to have you think. It's hard. Leadership will always be hard because we're leading people. But if we can put a system in place that gives us the information and sets the foundation to give us those baselines, then it gives us a significantly higher chance, that what we're doing in leadership is more of a success.
I love it. I'm writing this down, of course. I have to figure out what I'm going to title this episode. I like to title it a particular way, and something that just, falls on my ears a certain way. So I'm going to look back at the notes and figure out what juicy nugget I'm going to put on there for you, Peter.
That's always one of the hardest things for me in having these conversations, is that so many aspects of what we've done tie together. And so a half an hour, or a 45-minute, session at a conference, it doesn't quite do it justice. Or I did a 5-minute version, of trying to explain these things at Disruptive, which was a lot of fun. It was a good exercise of trying to boil down, these ideas into something succinct, and it touches on it, but it's, I could talk about it for hours.
Oh yeah, I've done that 5-minute thing too, And it's interesting how clear you can get with your message in 5 minutes. Right?
And also how terrifying it is because the slides move whether you want them to or not. So for someone like me who I like to tell stories, I'm fully comfortable getting up in front of a group for 45 minutes, but getting up, in front of a group for 5 minutes, where it's timed and trying to be impactful is significantly different.
It is. It really is. It takes kind of a different skill to hone for sure. Okay. So for those who are listening, that may be kind of at a crossroads or struggling just a bit in their leadership, and they're just looking for that oomph, that little extra energy they need to get them through the rest of the week. What might be the words of wisdom that you may leave them with?
There's a camaraderie in successful leadership that I think is missed a lot of times. And as I speak at conferences and as I work with my company and as I work with other organizations, I realize that there are so many common threads in leadership challenge. And so where we process them oftentimes by ourselves, alone at home on our drive into work, when we wake up in the morning, the things that keep us up at night. The real success in that comes when we're collaborating and engaging on those challenges together. And, the recognition that comes, when we realize that someone else is having that same challenge, someone that we respect, someone that, from all external appearances appears, successful. We can, for Greystone, we can line up, our growth numbers and our awards, and all of these things. But at the end of the day, it's our leadership challenges that keep me up at night, and they won't stop. I mean, there's no arrival point when it comes to leadership. But if we recognize that point that we're all in this together, and if we can approach conversations that way, then I think it opens up the communication, and we learn faster, we learn better, we hear more, when we recognize that it's not just us. I started in this industry when I was 20, or actually when I was 17. I started my business when I was 20. And for the first 5 years, I didn't feel like I was capable of really matching up against people who had started it through, later in life, through, more education and things like that, until I realized one day, I said, wait, people are buying from me because they want what I bring to this. And everybody else, even the people with the education, with the titles, with the credentials, with the larger sized organizations, are still struggling, with the same insecurities, the same, trying to get through, solve the same people problems. And so I think just that encouragement of knowing that we all tend to have a bit of bravado when it comes to, showing what we think we're good at and things like that. But if we really dig into it, and if we let ourselves do that together, then we're all in a lot of similar places. And that's where I found most of my learning, is when I'm willing to let down that guard and not pretend to be something that I'm not.
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you. The message of not having to do it all alone is a consistent thread that comes from a lot of these talks. We do, again, it goes back to that, superhero with the cape and the shield. Yep. We just, you cannot pierce our blood. It's just the way it works.
Yep.
But I think in this case, I like this message ending on this. I think that people who are listening around will really benefit. And to be honest, I will too. I mean, going back to the home front, same thing. It's like you can't do it all alone. One person cannot sustain the household.
Right.
Leadership from the home front. Yep. So keeping that in mind, it's like, okay, how much more can there's a give and a take. There's a give and a take in all areas of life. And what is my role to give, and what is my time to take?
Yeah. And realizing that for most of us, especially, highly accountable people, that, our nature is to want to do it all ourselves, or to want to take control of all of it, ourselves. And so, yeah, that's something that I have to constantly remind myself of too.
Oh, I definitely appreciate the nugget. And I really value this conversation that we've had too, Peter. It's been wonderful. I'm glad I followed my gut on that, seeing you from the conference and then having you here now. So for those who are listening, if you found great value in this conversation, don't forget to share it. Share it when I share it on social, share it through iTunes or wherever you listen. It's on 25 different platforms worldwide. And when you rate it also and write a review, and from the IT perspective, the algorithms move that up, and so that people can find this type of content more easily. So please do that wherever you listen. But thank you for joining the Leadership with Heart podcast. Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.